Yes, so good morning, everyone. Welcome to our unboxing session, Dataspace's Dialogues, and we are here to celebrate today a new status quo. And I'm super excited because we have a full-packed agenda. In 3 hours, we will give you a walkthrough through basically all the great things that happened in the past months. Those of you who already were with us for our summit already got a notion of the things going on out there. And we thought now, even though the summit is not that far away from us, it would be time to give you some more insights into the great things that happened since then in this short period of time. We brought with us people from Finland and from all over Europe to show you things about governance, to show you the latest state of play when it comes to open source implementations of especially the connectors. We will talk about testbed, so infrastructure for data spaces based on IDS. And then this is the part where I'm actually most excited about. We will show you a live and kicking data space and we'll give the floor to our colleagues from acatech to talk in depth about mobility data space. Because I don't want to buy too much time of you, maybe Reinhard Achatz already wants to join me here on stage. Because it's up to him to actually welcome all of you here to this great event. Let's see if he can already make it to the stage. In the meantime, mobility data space at the focus of our event today. It's rather to the end, so stay tuned here. In any case, this session here, the entire 3 hours will be recorded. And if you're watching this on YouTube, just make sure you have a look into the video description, because there you're also able to jump to the points in the agenda that you really would like to see. All others here live with us, you have the benefit to be able to see everything live and uncut. So glad you're with us. And with that, let's see again if Mr. Achatz already made it to our stage. There he is. I can see him. Hello, Reinhold. Glad you're with us. And like I said, would be great if you could welcome the audience. Mr. Achatz is our president of the association, and therefore I'm glad that he took the time to be with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Christoph. And I think really it's great to have basically the event today. And it is great as well to share that we are living in very exciting times. I think more than 20 years ago, internet was started, and this was basically the first way of sharing data. Then in a second step, obviously, the big platforms we all know were created. And now in a third event or in a third level, basically, we are talking about a new paradigm shift, and this is exactly data spaces. And I think from my point of view, this is now the time where we make it happen. And this is now the time where this third element comes into life. And there's a big difference compared to what the platforms offer, because obviously, yes, the big platforms offer sharing, but they really take a relevant part of the winnings, the earnings away from basically the supply of the data. And this is exactly the big difference data spaces can offer. So basically, data spaces are operated by a non-for-profit organization, and all the revenue, all the benefits of sharing data will stay with the data user, with the people sharing data, and with the data people providing services with the data. And I think a great example is basically the implementation of the mobility data space, because this is really the first real-life data space implementation. And we did a great demonstration of the mobility data space at the IDSA World Congress in Hamburg, which was very much recognized. And we already could show 16 use cases working live really in Hamburg, and this will basically go on. And the next steps will be obviously the scale up. The scale up, I think, in 3 directions. One hand, basically the use cases will obviously scale up by themselves, so they will have more users. The second element of scale up is basically we will definitely have more use cases. And from my point of view, we can look for up to 500 or 1,000 use cases within the next years. And the third direction of scale up is obviously the regional extension. And this means It will not be limited to Germany, but it will definitely extend to all countries in Europe and even beyond. I think already first data from DMW from United States are available in the data mobility data space. So, but I think there's a different event as well. So not only the first use cases were built, but as well, what we did in the last weeks was really working on launching the Dataspaces Business Alliance. The Dataspace Business Alliance is basically a joint activity of BDVA, Big Data Value Association, FIWARE Foundation, GaiaX, and IDSA. And the idea basically is really that we create one interoperable way of building data spaces. And I think this is something Lars will definitely elaborate more on it. And for this reason, I think I don't take too much time. I welcome you again to the event. I'm very excited to be part of it. And I would like to hand over to Lars, basically first to Christoph and then to Lars. And he will start presenting the Dataspaces Business Alliance. Thank you very much. And yeah, talk to you later again.
Thank you, Gernot. Glad that also that you're with us the entire 3 hours. So that's really, really good. We will see you back in the discussion and Q&A that we moderate together. And let's have a very quick look into the agenda. So for all of you, also some housekeeping. This tool might be new to you, so be aware of the fact that you have a chat functionality right on your right, so this should be there. Feel free to interact with us and with the speakers at any point in time, so put your questions there. We will really try to keep track of all the things that you have in mind for the later Q&A session, so put it there. The speakers will also answer most probably some of the questions already during the event in the chat, so a lot of ways to interact. And also check out the booths with more information on all the topics that we strive today. So Lars will now be with us to talk a bit more about the strategical alliance that we just announced some weeks ago. So it's brand new, really, really fresh, and I'm excited to hear Lars about the things that happened there already. Let's see if he's already with us here on stage. So Lars, yeah, there he is. Perfect, live and in color. Good to have you here.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me and see me?
Loud and clear. Let's see if we can also see your slides in case you brought any.
Yes, let me check this. And yeah.
Perfect. For the rest, grab a cup of tea or coffee. 3 hours is a long session, so yeah, I really hope that you enjoy the content that we brought with us for you, and I really can say it's worth saying.
So then do you see my slides in full screen or in half?
In half screen, yeah.
In half screen, yeah, okay. Yeah. No.
I can see also people from Austria joined. That's awesome. Good morning, Alexander. And we have people from Vienna. So
one more sec.
Yeah.
This should.
Now it works. Full screen, full color. Good.
Incredible. All right. Christoph, is it okay that I may take over?
For sure. Go ahead.
Great. So then, good morning, all of you. I'm really happy that you're with us. And yeah, well, thank you, Gernot, for the great introduction and for motivating once again the big goal which lies ahead of us and the big expectations. And well, I think today it is up to all of us to showcase that we already have achieved a lot and that we have gone a lot of the way already. So my job today is to show how we really will make this happen on a European scale and even on a global scale, and who's part of the game and how we think that we can operationalize it and make it happen. So more from the political and the strategic viewpoint, and later on we will see how we will make it happen from the operational, organizational viewpoint and from the technical viewpoint. Well, you've learned in the last weeks that a lot has been happening in teaming up between all the big organizations on data sharing, and I would like to give a little bit transparency about what's going on, what our plans are, and well, you all are already part of this endeavor, and I really want to drop the call of action to really team up and to continue on this path. I think we can really write history, so to say, and finally come up with data spaces, which are a paradigm shift for data economy. And at the core of it is data sharing, because there will be more benefit for each company, more value creation than when playing alone. Okay. So IDSA, we are on our way with data spaces since 5.5 years. And when I started, data spaces was new. Nobody really knew what data spaces are. This has changed, I would say, since 2 years. So I think we get more and more clearer idea of what data spaces are and why they are of such a relevance. And I think with the end of last year, it has finally arrived in industry, in different industrial sectors, that data spaces are the way to go. We do see it in mobility data space. We do see it in Catena and in a smart connected supply network for supply networks. But we also see this in other domains like smart cities, energy, agriculture, logistics, and so on. On the other hand side, we have a lot of organizations which are of an altruistic and neutral nature that try to shape data spaces and to give certain building blocks of what we need. And to really make data spaces an important pillar of the future data economy, we have to come up with a common framework for data spaces. It can't be that we end up with, I built it with this or with that, and data space built on that concept or on this concept, and at the end it's not interoperable, and we end up with silos again. So that is not our goal. So we need a common framework. Well, we have a deep understanding among the different organizations that we have to drive this coherence. And here you can see displayed what this means. So all of you are familiar with different ecosystems. So a lot of you are with Gaia, a lot of you are with BDBA, some are with My Data, some of you are from the Netherlands, from the Data Sharing Coalition. Well, we are talking with each other since years, and we are already on a path of convergence. There are rule books, architectures, views of the world, canvases, and we have made a first attempt to bring all of this together in the Design Principles for Data Spaces paper, version 1, which you can see in this magenta colored box. And we have to drive to go this path further and come up with a common data spaces framework, which holds true for all data spaces in all domains, a jointly agreed, consensual, harmonized document which contains all architectures, so the Gaia architecture, the IDSA architecture, the FIWARE components, the Citra rulebook, the My Data operator. So the harmonization canvas from Data Sharing Coalition. So it's really already converging, and we are on the path to come up with this common framework. So, how are we going to do this? So we need a co-creation phase where we harmonize this all the groundwork which we do have to one framework, and we are on the path, and therefore we have to work closely together with the concrete endeavors, with industry, with you, with the companies, which do have the need to build data spaces, and we have a lot of them. So we have really the big ones, which we do know, which are quite mature, like Catena and Mobility Data Space and Smart Connected Supply Network, but we have a lot other data space endeavors already on its way in our vertical ecosystems. And it's our role as neutral organizations to, well, to lead, guide this process to come up with this, well, common framework, and we will write it down in something, probably a handbook for data spaces. In the agenda, you can read about the Data Spaces Business Alliance, and so I would like to motivate what this is and why we've come up with this. So this is a picture on, well, the digital data related initiatives, the full stack from hardware infrastructure via the software infrastructure, the data spaces, the data value creation and artificial intelligence up to the smart services. And at the end, well, the consumer, the customer wants to have the smart services. That is what you can really see at the end. But you need the whole stack below to get it going. And it's well, we compare it with mobile communication, right? So we all just want to have a phone call with someone in another country, and when I'm traveling to the Netherlands, it shall work anyway. So roaming must be possible. So, but well, underneath there are the mobile networks and the GSM standard, for example, and we have to come up with that for data sharing for data spaces, and that is why we have to, well, come up with a common framework for the stack below. And you can see here that with the initiatives Gaia-X, FIWARE, IDSA, and BDVA, we cover a lot of this stack from data infrastructure up to industrial data and AI. And then we can make the great endeavors like Catena, Mobility Data Space, and other sectoral initiatives happen. And with that, we will create an important part of the landscape in Europe, and then we can interact with, well, other activities like the HPC initiatives, the IDSA, and everything else which is out there in Europe. And that is the reason why we've chosen to team up among the 4 initiatives, because, well, with BDVA, FIWARE, Gaia-X, and IDSA, we pool more than 1,000 leading key industrial players, associations of all kinds, research organizations, innovators, and policymakers, which are active in the field of data. And with that, I would say we represent more or less everyone in the picture which I've shown before in the world of data sharing. And I'm always saying this is the most inclusive initiative on data spaces which you can imagine, because, well, everyone of you and out there is part of the Data Spaces Business Alliance. So everyone is part of one of the 4 organizations. So therefore, this is not only the 4 organizations which I'm showing here, this also contains other initiatives like My Data, for example, but also the Data Sharing Coalition, because, well, they are already in there. And that is the core idea here. We want to join forces. We want to speak with one voice. So it's not a question, I can build a data space based on Gaia, or I can build a data space based on the BDVA concepts, or a data space built with FIWARE components or with IDS connectors. No, it's, well, you need all of this to build a data space, because data spaces are a big thing, and you need to have all of this in place, and probably some more concepts. And that is what we want to integrate into one common framework to finally make data spaces happen. And we want to take leadership because, well, there's a lack of leadership in making data spaces on a political, strategic, pan-European level happen, and that is what we want to do. So coming up with this common framework, sharing our expertise, and together with you, with the companies, with all our members, engineer data spaces, because, well, that is what we have done the last years, and I think where we have all the experts in place. That's the idea of the Data Space Business Alliance. So we do not want to create another monstrum. It's just like speaking with one voice, coming up with one common framework, and finally make data spaces happen on a large scale. And well, just an example of the groundwork which has been done, and why we need this big approach and the holistic approach. But because if we talk about data spaces, it's something new. Like data spaces is a paradigm shift in data economy. So we have a completely new vision how to organize industry and data sharing. So this is new. So there are a lot of visionary documents which all of our organizations do have. And then it's, okay, well, how to build a data space? Well, that's written in all these architecture documents. But once you've built the data space, you have to ask yourself, okay, well, how to run a data space? So all these operational, organizational, administrative, legal issues, business issues. So, and we have also documents on this out there. So there are several rule books. So the Zitra rulebook for data sharing, for example. And then we have to, well, tie all of this together. And we have done this in the first attempt in the Design Principles for Data Spaces paper, which is out there since the beginning of the year. And we are starting this Friday a process to come up with a second version of it, to come up with this common framework for data spaces. And that is what hopefully helps all of you to flourish. And I would invite all of you to become part of this process, to give in your demands, your requirements, so that we really have an agreed and harmonized framework for data spaces, which is all of your lives. I want to make one more remark here. So we have the Data Space Business Alliance, which I would say is the most inclusive data spaces alliance in Europe, and containing probably everyone who's interested in the field of data sharing, data spaces. And you may stumbled across the team data spaces. So that's the same. So the team data spaces is our concrete endeavor to give support connected to the Digital Europe work program of the European Commission, to give support to data spaces which are related to the European data strategy, so to the Horizon Europe program and the Digital Europe program. So this is really a dedicated activity, like a research project. It's not called a research project, it's called a coordinating and support action. And so the four organizations from the Data Spaces Business Alliance, we have teamed up with others, which I've shown before. So very important, My Data Global, which add the notion of personal data sharing, a new governance, which is also another important initiative, the Data Sharing Coalition in the Netherlands, and well, all the researchers and implementation partners which can help making data spaces finally happen. So please be not confused. Team Data Spaces is a part of this whole Data Space Business Alliance, and something where we have already some concrete ideas how to, well, give support to the creation of data spaces. And that is where I would like to end and, well, leave you to all the great insights of the next hours. I'm happy that we finally arrived in the phase of building data spaces, seeing them flourish, really have something at hand which we can grab and feel, and where we can see results. So let's build data spaces. And, well, what I would like to remind all of us is, why do we have the concept of data spaces? Because data spaces is this paradigm shift, which I've mentioned. So it's different than a central data sharing via a platform or in a in a network where there's a focal company which defines everything and all rules. Dataspaces is a very open, federated approach, like a peer-to-peer network. So, and it is very agile. So, a lot of companies joining, leaving. It must be as easy as possible. And dataspaces, they flourish better the more participants there are, the more data endpoints are connected. With that, we can enlarge the pool of data. And that is what we need for the economy of Europe, for the global economy. More data endpoints connected, more data available. This is the foundation for a successful artificial intelligence and the future of new smart services. Therefore, we have to talk about data spaces, and therefore we may not end up in silos. And that is why we have to make it interoperable in the first. And then, therefore, we need common design principles, this common framework. And then you can build on this foundation, which is composed of Gaia infrastructure, the IDS framework, FIWARE components, my data operators, whatever, other technologies which are out there. This is all compatible. We will all integrate it like Ocean Protocol, other technologies. But here we are talking on the conceptual level. If we have this common framework, then you can rely on this framework. You can be sure that everything is interoperable, and then you can build your data space in your domain for your sake. And that is what we really have to do, and that is what the neutral organizations like IDSA and all our friends are there for. We are there to harmonize. You are there to make business, and let's do this together, and let's build data spaces. Thanks a lot, and I'm really happy to have you here today and to learn all the latest insights. Thank you, and with that, Christoph, please proceed.
Great, thank you, Lars, for these insights and talking a bit more about DSPA, the strategical overview of things that currently happen. And I guess it's not only Europe that is really looking to the things that happen currently in the field of data spaces. And actually, you already paved the way and made the perfect bridge to Marko Turpeinen, who will now talk in depth about governance. So I think you underlined perfectly the importance of governance, frameworks, rules, and the things that are needed besides the technical issues in data spaces. So Marko, I'm glad that you're with us, CEO of 1001 Lakes. Now 50 minutes in-depth governance talk and the strategic importance of this topic. Thank you for being with us. We can see your PowerPoint and now the slides. Perfect, you're good to go. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you, Christoph, and thank you, Lars, and it's great to be here. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Marko Turpeinen. I'm the CEO of 1001 Lakes, as Christoph said, and well, I have to start with a little bit of an anecdote from my own past, because triggered by the discussion and points made by previous speakers. So I started my journey in this field of data and digitalization very much in a project as a young researcher about 30 years ago in Helsinki University of Technology. And my professor had been discussing with some people from CERN at that time and was quite interested in this potential of a new infrastructure or new innovation that could make big things happen, and then got a research project going with local media industry, that would there be something that could come out of this new thing called World Wide Web. And I think I'm really excited to hear this discussion of, well, are we now actually at the same kind of point that we are thinking of a whole new paradigm of what can be done with data? How could we structure the world of data? How can we make it work better for the society with data spaces? So it's really exciting to be in this endeavor together with all of you. So my topic today is kind of to look at the different issues of governance related to data spaces, and maybe kind of put this framework that Lars already mentioned a little bit with a little bit other words and diving a bit deeper maybe into what do we mean by, from the governance perspective of these different layers. But before that, so just a very brief, this is a kind of an advertisement even. So we have been commissioned by the, we meaning 1001 Lakes, so commissioned by the Finnish Ministry of Transport and Communication to do a study of what is the state of data spaces now, and kind of help the ministry and Finnish organizations to position themselves on what to do next. But we are going to publish this openly, so in November 2021, hopefully, so so everybody can see the results. But we use this kind of a framework there to identify different initiatives that have to do with data spaces, and where do they stand in terms of regulation and frameworks and standardization and building blocks, and are they very domain specific, or are they, you know, crossing across domains, and then kind of a key fact. So this is kind of a template that we used. And then just to give you a taster, so this is our result for IDS. So definitely IDS is influencing all of these different layers, and it is also kind of very much motivating the actual usage and domains to actually use this. But as organization, IDSA itself, so is much more in this sort of framework level and building these generic building blocks and trying to make this happen. So this is just a kind of a framework setting of some of the things that we've done recently. But then going back to what Lars said, so there was this paper that was published in May. So design principles for data spaces, and I also participated in the writing team. And there was this 3-layer structure that was presented. So there's the soft infrastructure at the bottom. So you have the building blocks. You have the interoperability, trust, data value, governance. Those are the 4 categories that we described. And this 12 building blocks that are now in the paper it's evolving. It's not like that it's set in stone, that these are the ones, but they are a good guess of what are the most important building blocks that are needed. And then at the top, so there's data spaces as ecosystems. So really the service layer, the usage layer, kind of really these are the networks, these are the parties that agree on sharing data under these conditions, and those may or may not be kind of domain only. So you might have intra-domain, but you have also potential for cross-domain ecosystems. And of these, there are many. So you have you know, hopefully tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of services that appear on top of data spaces as ecosystems are evolving. So that's the top level. But then in the paper, so we didn't quite come up with a name for the middle layer. And I'm here calling it data spaces as commons, because we talk about common data spaces, common European data spaces, for example. And there is a need for this sort of thinking that what's happening at this middle layer in terms of how is it governed, what are the principles that we are using also across different domains, but then how do we take into account the domain-specific knowledge? So yes, if you're health, it's a different story than if you're mobility. And how does the expertise that we need from these different domains actually become involved in the process, and we get that level going. So that's at this middle level, the commons level, and in many ways we are defining all of these 3 as we are going, but I think it's important to recognize that we need this middle layer as well thought through. So that's my framing of what this means, and what are the governance structures, governance models then for soft infrastructure and commons and ecosystems. So starting with the soft infrastructure. So for example, here we are really thinking of, well, I'm building now a version of this soft infrastructure building block. I'm making the self-sovereign identity management infrastructure for Gaia X, for example. How do I get it approved? How do I get it recognized that it is complying to Gaia X, it is, you know, applicable to the role that it's set in the larger framework, for example, that the soft infrastructure building blocks need to meet. So that needs governance. So we need to have mechanisms to recognize that where are these different building blocks in their maturity, and are they ready to be used, and are they kind of certified to be used. And that's exactly what IDSA is doing under IDS. So there is the reference architecture model that describes these different building blocks very well. But then you have the IDSA's own mechanisms. You have the rule book that says what can be done with the IDS components, and if you're a member, so what do you expect to get from IDSA? That's one set of governance. But then there is also this certification layer, so you can certify that your solution is actually compliant with the soft, infrastructure building block requirements, and so that's one important level of governance that actually IDSA is providing the framework for right now. And then you have the governance layer for the commons. So again, as said, so you need to have some mechanisms to discuss that. What are these generic principles that we are using? For example, when we are doing things cross-domain, how do we actually make it happen? What are some principles that we can all agree on, and how is that specified and managed? So that needs governance, and then there is the need for very specific expertise in each different domain. So here are some examples of what's going on in that on that side. I really appreciated this paper that came out a few weeks ago from OECD about data sharing and data access, and how important this is globally, and how really this should be a wide global initiative to come up with the mechanisms that really foster data sharing. So it's high on the agenda, and it's very, very good for all of us. But I think, interestingly also, it says something about governance and this notion of whole of government approach, and how internationally different governments should actually take this as a strategic priority, even to come up with these generic principles. So this is something that's evolving, but there is a clear statement that it's needed, and again, I find this very exciting. But then, more practically, there are some ideas on, well, what kind of bodies we need then for this commons structure, and data exchange board was an example in the design principles for Dataspace's version 1 paper, how we define this. So there it says that we might need 2 layers. So there is this sort of a data innovation board, which is actually now mentioned in the data governance DGA. So you have the regulation proposal that has the establishment of data innovation board in it, but then underneath here the idea was that we would need this more tactical and operational body that was in this paper called data exchange board. It could be called something else like data innovation advisory council or something else, but the point is that we need to have a body that gathers also the expertise from the different domains, and have this sort of cross-domain dialogue and more operational way of getting things going in place. So that's one. And then I just wanted to mention also that it's really important to recognize that all of these different domains are huge as such. And for example, Sitra, the Finnish Innovation Fund, is running now a project which is called Tehdas, towards European health data space, which just yesterday, for example, had a really exciting event, stakeholder event. And the point here is that the health sector has a very, very big need and will and high level of expertise to say that what's going to happen with health data. So we need to keep that discussion going and that link going, and that agency also there, that the sector can be doing their decisions. It's not like that we have a program like Gaia X, for example, that makes decisions for these different sectors, but it enables certain kinds of things that then the different sectors can take into use. And then at the last level, at the third level, so I just, so here we are talking about really these networks appearing, and some might be bigger, thousands of players, like Katina X is definitely one of those, and some might be smaller, some might be completely industrial, some might be more maybe public sector driven. So for example, we've been talking a lot lately about personal data and municipalities. So how do you govern these then? So for each of these, so you need to, more specific rules, more specific agreements. This is how this network is using the data. If I'm the city of Helsinki, I want our ecosystem players to adhere to these rules. For example, when we talk about personal data in specifically. So again, we need to go deeper and be more specific. So there we need, again, governance tools and structures on how those ecosystems then govern themselves. An example here, and again, based on some of the work that we've done here in Finland earlier, so it's an open tool, open model called Fair Data Economy Rulebook Model. And again, the idea here is that this is a template. It helps when you are starting to define the ecosystem rules. So who are in our network, who can access what, who can do what, who are the members, how do we take the different business, legal, technical, ethical, and we're actually adding security here as a fifth. So all of these dimensions, how do we think them through when we apply the data space, building blocks and the principles in our ecosystem? So here the fair data economy rulebook model can help. So that was all a brief intro to the questions of governance, and I'm going to stay in the session. It's going to be really exciting for the whole 3 hours, so happy to join discussions later.
Great, thank you, Marko, for these insights, and also thank you for staying with us for the entire time. So far, I wasn't able to see any questions in the question section, but please feel free to put them there. We will get back to the questions in the discussion at the end or during the sessions in the chat. Thanks, Marko. And with that, we leave the field of theory for a bit. Yeah. So we heard now about DSPA, liaisons, how to work together to speak with one voice, how important that is for data spaces in general. We now saw governance approaches. And again, here, frameworks and structure is a really important aspect. And standardization is an important aspect in order to create compatibility here between different approaches. Now, Stefan Ettl will be with us on stage, and I really will cut it short here for my part and would leave the floor to you, Stefan, very quickly. Good morning, good to see you.
Hello, good morning.
What we do now is we leave a bit the field of great theory and go more towards practical approaches because we want to talk a bit about open source. Those of you who explored data space concepts and especially IDS already know how hard it can be to implement all the components that you need on your own. So open source and the components that are developed out there in the wild by consortia are very, very important. So it will make your life easier if you want to step into data spaces, want to build your own data space, etc. So let's focus for some time here on one very exciting component, one connector project that Stefan will talk now a bit more about. And Stefan, floor is yours. Thanks for being with us. And you're good to go, I think. I can see your slides already.
Thank you. And you can hear me properly?
Yes, perfect.
Cool, thanks. Thank you a lot for the invite and for the chance to present you the Eclipse Dataspace Connector and actually also the idea behind it. So my name is Stefan Ettl. I'm from the BMW Group in Munich. I'm also representing BMW within Gaia-X, within the Dataspace Business Committee, for example. But I'm also part of Catena-X, and there in Catena-X, I'm especially taking care of the idea of the Eclipse Dataspace Connector. And therefore, I'm here today to give you a bit more context, what the idea is behind and what we actually want to do with it. So, but before we jump into the technical world, I would say, let's face it from the business side first. So what is the idea behind the Eclipse Dataspace Connector? Actually, maybe you ask yourself, why yet another connector? I know already a lot of them, but maybe let me start from another end, really from the business aspect. You know, if I show you this slide, it might be very familiar to you. You know, what we want to do in data spaces is cluster organizations with various interests. You know, so-called domains. You may know the Gaia X idea of data spaces with the different domains. Started at 9 domains. Then we clustered it into hubs. Now we have a lot of hubs. I think it's more than 15 hubs now. So it has grown tremendously, I would say, in the last couple of months. So, but we know this. We know data spaces for a long time now. Christoph and also Lars would say, yeah, Stefan, that's what we are doing for a couple of years now. Why is it now so relevant? Why should we not retire this plan when we do it for such a long time? And I think because the world has changed a bit, not just a bit, but it really changed. If I would regard my organization, or let's say the kind of organization I am working for, as we are not a software vendor, as you all know, I would say before some years, if we would have talked about data spaces, we may have said, great idea, let's find another partner, cloud vendor, software vendor who does it. And when it's finished, please wake us up again and let's talk about it, how we can integrate. That changed, to be honest. Today, if you would ask me, are you participating in a data space? I would say, no, not just. Today we are actively contributing to a data space. We want to shape the data space that it really fits. We want to be part of the construction of the data space because we realize that we really need it. Why do we need it now? Because what we've seen is that in a competitive world, you know, organizations need to differentiate from each other. And it's really hard to do that in today's competitive world. You know, we have such big players with strong business models. How can we differentiate as an organization? And it comes more and more into this direction that we differentiate over our network that is well established and through our processes, which are cross-organizational and not just facing one single organization, but going through organizations and which are integrated in the single organization's processes. We've seen this through the crisis, for example. A good example is if you take the current semiconductor issue. But we have also other challenges we need to face in future. You know, if you think about CO2 emissions, and to face such issues and to solve those tasks, it's nearly impossible, I would say, to do that by organizational wise. So one organization cannot solve these upcoming future tasks. We need a strong network. We need to connect to each other in order to really face those issues and to solve these upcoming tasks, you know. And therefore, I think we realized that data spaces are essential for us. They are really important, and that changed. And therefore, we don't want to just look at it and see how it goes. We want to be part of it. We want to shape it, and therefore, and that's one argument why we started the idea of Catena X, why we've created Catena X actually. Catena X, you may have heard about it, the automotive network. So it's yet another, I would say, cluster or data space of different players in the automotive industry, starting with the automotive industry. But as I said, what's different is that we have a broad variety of different players in the team that builds up this idea of the automotive network. It's not just, don't get me wrong, not just the cloud vendors, service providers, and so on, but it's also the users itself who may not sell any service in the end, but they want to participate and they want to make sure that this network works as expected and really solves their needs. So maybe let's make it a bit more tangible. What are our needs in the end, you know? So what do we need? And I have something here for you that makes it maybe a bit clearer. So if you look at the car, you know, we have a very long value chain, you know, and this value chain, it's really hard to connect it, you know. It's not really connected, to be honest. We call it, if we move on from our position, the OEM position, downwards is first tier, second tier, and so on. We call it the N tier supply chain. And the big challenge is to get this supply chain connected in the end, because what we want to solve or want to build up is really an integrated circle of production, you know, from the very first supplier that's constructing any good out of a raw material until the recycler that put this material back into the value chain, you know. This needs to be connected, and that's actually the main challenge of Catena-X in the end. And in order to face this, we've already started to build up an idea, how could this network look like? And here you can see a lot of layers, you know. At the top, we have the business applications, you know, solving very concrete business needs. Then we want to have a central or a unique entry for our partners with a great user experience design, and so on. But the most important thing, I would say, is the lowest part. And this is what we call Gaia-X compliant IDS system, because that's actually our base layer to enable the whole network, to connect our different partners. And this is where we want to make, again, use of the ideas of the IDS. And this is also where we started and where we are right now, and also considering ideas like a connector, for example. So in the end, Catena-X will not be the only one. As you've heard before from Marko, it's not the only network, you know. There's also the mobility data space, there is a health data space, and so on. And what we cannot do is to just say each and every ecosystem works the same way, uses the same technology. It's exactly the idea of interoperability, but that's hard to achieve, you know, because in the end, each ecosystem decides by their own which technology to use. And this is where we started with the ideas of the Eclipse Dataspace connector, because what we want to have, our vision is an element, let's call it the connector, or call it a gateway at the border of the organization that is capable of connecting us as an organization to different ecosystems, to participate in different ecosystems, even if there are different technologies, you know. And that's the main idea behind the Eclipse Dataspace connector that we want to solve from a business side of, I would say. So let's say challenge accepted. Let's try or let's work on such an interoperability idea to connect not just Catena-X members with each other, but also cross Dataspace members with each other, let's say, but on the participant level, you know, not at a higher level where we have a federated service that's taking care of data sharing through the data spaces, because that's a lot of effort in the end. In our opinion, the best and most federated way is to keep it at the participant level. there is also the highest, let's say, value where you can create real sovereignty. If you can decide where you want to participate, and yeah, where you want to be interoperable with, you know. And that's the main business idea, let's say, behind the Eclipse Dataspace connector. Now, let's take a bit of a deep dive into the Eclipse Dataspace connector from the technical point of view. So what is it now, and how do we consider to solve this issue, which is quite complicated, you know? So first of all, let's start with this slide. Who are we? Who is currently contributing to the Eclipse Dataspace connector? As you can see here, we have a lot of organizations. Many of them are also, many of them, but not all of them, are also participating in Catena-X, for example. But for us, it was really important to have an agnostic and independent, real open source project, you know, where everyone can participate, where we have a good open source basis, open source community, where we work together, and in a structured way, and where everyone knows the rules, where not one party is leading the whole open source project, but where we have this community thought, you know. This was for us a very important basis, and as governance model, we found it at the Eclipse Foundation. For us, this was the right way to go, and this is how we started this base idea of the Eclipse Dataspace connector. And maybe connecting to my starting point again, what you see here is now already this variety of different partners, you know. You see cloud vendors, you see also software vendors, you see also users or organizations coming more from an academic point of view, you know. And this is what we wanted to have, you know, having different partners, different views in this connector idea to make it great in the end. So features, what we need in the end in order to make this happen, that we can really support different ecosystems, is in the end a very modular system. And to be honest, beyond the other aspects you see here, that's the most important aspect, and I will relate on that later again in my next slide, because modularity is very important if we want to really drive this forward, this idea, you know. What we also did was a lot of separation. So let's take a connector, as you know it, you know, the connector idea, and just divide it in many different parts and make it as modular as possible. What we did as well was, in order to receive a high level of scalability, we've divided a bit the control and data planes, you know. As you know from many other connectors in the past, data is flowing through the connector. That's what we changed. We said the connector is a controlling instance, but the data flows not through the connector because of scalability reasons. But on the other hand, we want to keep the idea of policy enforcement. That's then another challenge. If you don't have the data in the connector, how can you enforce policies on consumer side, data consumer side, for example? So that's all challenges we are currently facing, and we want to solve, you know, with this idea. But what is really important with the whole connector idea, with the Eclipse Dataspace connector, is we are really going because we want to use it in Catena-X. And therefore, we are going with the use case demands and use case requirements steps forward. We are not building something because we think it's right. We are building it because use cases need it. And that's maybe also different from other ideas, you know. This is, again, the idea, what I've said before with the modularity. What we did is we've created a very independent agnostic core system with a service provider interface where you can create your extension for it that serves your ecosystem, you know? And that's a very important idea. You can just plug and play, so plug in different extensions with different capabilities, you know, relevant for your ecosystem, for your data space in the end. So, and in the end, that was necessary to achieve the goals I've set before. Here you see again, we've divided somehow the control idea from the data idea. You know, if you want to deep dive more on this, just get in touch with us. I will just go over this slide a bit more quickly to really give you an idea about the whole software, how it works. So in the end, as I said, still policies are very important for us. How do we want to achieve that? We want to try to keep the connector as a controller instance, you know, that handles the transfer protocol, the transfer mechanism, but does not implement the transfer necessarily because, as I said, of scalability reasons. Nevertheless, we can enforce policies, you know. If you think about Kubernetes OPA, for example, Open Policy Agent, that's already existing. We can just trigger this one to enforce policies on a certain level. That's just the first step, you know. We have many more ideas how we can move forward, also together with IDS and IDS certification of different services, you know, to drive this policy enforcement thought forward and maybe also deeper into the cloud services which are already existing. So in the end, and that's my last slide to finish, in the end, you are all welcome to give us your ideas, to give us feedback, or to participate, to collaborate with us, building forward this idea of an agnostic connector, capable of IDS, clearly, but serving different ecosystems by just having one piece of software that a company needs to deploy, maintain, and operate in the end, you know. So feel free to get in touch with us and have a look at our project. I'm very happy to answer questions or to give you more insights about the Eclipse Dataspace connector. Now back to you, Christoph. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these in-depth insights. So even in time, perfect timing here. Bert Verdonk already asked the question. Bert, we saw your question. I think Stefan will stay with us until the end, Stefan, right? Yeah, yes. So we will get right to this question in our discussion round because I really like also the question here. Perfect, thank you very much. Next will be Ulrich Ahle. He is already here with us on stage. Welcome, Ulrich. Ulrich is CEO of the FIWARE Foundation and also a member of the IDSA board. So great that you're here with us today to give us some more insights, because what we want to see right now is actually a second great example of connectors that are out into the wild that can be used right away. And therefore Ulrich and Gabriele and Luca from engineering will give some more insights also on the business perspective and the technical perspective, just like Stefan did for the EDC. So Ulrich and Gabriele, welcome on stage. Stage is yours, and I'm glad to know more about your specific connector.
Yeah, Christoph, thank you very much, and welcome to all of you. A good morning, a good afternoon, wherever you are on the world and listening to the show here today. Together with Gabriele, and then later in the afternoon with Gernot, I'd like to give an update on the FIWARE True Connector, which is another implementation of the IDS connector specification. But why are we doing this? Because our new digital life will gravitate around data, around digital twin, around context information, as we call it, describing what's happening around, where, when, and why. Here with an example of the city of Berlin, but the same is true for the use cases which Catena X are addressing in the automotive supply chain, in quality management, in logistics. So we need to know what's happening, when, where, and why. But very often, this data are organized in silos. Silos because data models don't fit to each other, interfaces are not open, or because there's no trust in sharing the data with partners in the supply chain, with partners in the city, or in different other domains, in agri-food, in energy, in medical, and so on. And what Stefan said before, it's all about interoperability. So it is our common task to break down these data silos, to make data available, accessible on different data spaces, and the technology to do so can be different. And this is what we see in the real world, also within the IDSA ecosystem. There are already different implementations of the IDS connector, but all are following the same specifications. All are following the same standards. And that is of utmost importance to create real interoperable data spaces. And we need this interoperability because, and showing this in an example of a city again, we will have digital twins coming from different origins. And especially in cities, we have the situation that not only smart city, but also smart mobility, smart energy, also industry happening in cities come together, and we need the interoperability between these data spaces to be able to, as shown here on the left side, excuse me, to capture the data from the real world, then to have it represented in a digital representation of the real world. This is what we call the digital twin. Then to use AI, so artificial intelligence, to use big data analytics and so on, to process, to analyze and visualize this data, to update the digital twin, and then out of the digital twin to provide data back to the real world, to the decision makers, to the operators, or where it is possible, even to actuate out of the digital twin into the real world. For example, an autonomously driving car is simply a car which is operated in the digital twin, but is in reality driving around in the real world, steered, operated out of the digital twin. And as Lars mentioned it before, and here I can speed up and catch up a bit of time, this is the reason why these 4 organizations created the Dataspaces Business Alliance, unleashing the data economy. And it was signed on September 23rd, so 1 month ago, by the presidents of the 4 organizations, with a target to create a common framework for interoperable data spaces and to speed up the creation of more and more data spaces, which we need in the future. We need even now, but we don't have too many, at least at the moment. Bringing together the best skills, bringing together already existing assets, and there are a lot of assets which fit quite well into this framework, and then talking with one voice, bringing the same message through different channels into the world. And here the hubs have been mentioned already before by Stefan, the Gaia X hubs, but also the 3 other organizations do have hubs. IDSA has the IDSA hubs FIWARE has the FIWARE Innovation Hubs, the so-called iHubs, where we have more than 25 worldwide in the meantime. And in total, the 4 organizations have more than 100 hubs. And this is an excellent instrument for the dissemination of the results we are producing here. And also FIWARE is contributing to all of this. Marko mentioned, and also Lars mentioned, the paper Design Principles for Data Spaces. And we contributed also a lot to this paper with something which is also within the FIWARE for Data Spaces white paper, which can be downloaded here. And here the core picture of this, and that was also mentioned by Marko, are the technology building blocks which are needed to create interoperable data spaces. And again, the technology to implement it can be different, but we should use as much as possible common specifications within the different data spaces in the different domains. And we should use as much as possible common building blocks to do so. And here the IDS connector plays a major role to create a trusted exchange. A connector which can be implemented using different technologies, as I said. And here we are contributing from the FIWARE side with the FIWARE True Connector, which is based on the IDS specification and which will be presented by Gabriele in a second. Other building blocks we are contributing and which are also very important for the interoperability are standard data models. We have in the meantime more than 600 data models published on GitHub, created in a very much user-driven bottom-up approach, starting in smart cities, but now also in energy, in mobility, in industry, in robotics. So this is one important thing. And the second are standard APIs, common APIs, where NGS-ILD is more and more getting really the global standard for this APIs in interoperable data spaces. And these are 2 domains which we from the FIWARE side are mainly contributing together with IDS and the partners of this Data Spaces Business Alliance. And to close, we, and that was also mentioned before, the mobility data space is the first real data space which went live 3 weeks ago. Together with Reinhold, I had the opportunity to present it to our Minister for Transportation and Digital Infrastructure in Germany, Andreas, 2 weeks ago at the ITS World Congress. And from the FIWARE side, we are contributing 2 use cases to this mobility data space. One is a smart parking solution together with the city of Wolfsburg. And the second one is a digital twin of a mobility station in the city of Kiel. Realized together with partners in Wolfsburg, together with the Wobcom, which is the IT daughter of the utilities company there, and in Kiel together with Edix, which is an IT and technology company located in Kiel. Both are also FIWARE members, so part of the FIWARE ecosystem. And the mobility data space is finally the enabler for mobility solutions of the future. And both of these use cases are connected to the mobility data space via the FIWARE True Connector. And what's this about? This is now turn of Gabriele. And Gabriele, I think you will share your screen yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ulrich, for the introduction. Let me share the screen in a moment. Okay, could you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. So I am Gabriele De Luca. I am a senior researcher and technology manager, and I'm a member of the Smart Industry and Agri-Food Unit in the Research and Development Department of Engineering. Here we are going on to see more details about our proposal. The FIWARE True Connector that, as Ulrich mentioned before, is an IDS implementation, totally open source and part of the FIWARE catalog. So basically, we are talking about an IDS connector based on that fit and address the base security profile. I'm referring to the security profiles defined by IDSA and described into the reference architecture model. It is a Java application, so based on basically on Apache Camel and Spring Boot for defining message routes and services. It is aligned to the last IDS info model major release, so I mean the 4.1.x, and we have tested the integration of the FIWARE True Connector with other existing connectors like the one from GEC and Boost 4.0 during the official IDSA integration camp events in the past. We are working in order to integrate our solution with existing solution, for example, a running solution like the Dataspace connector. Basically, the True Connector is composed by two main parts: the execution code container that, according to the reference architecture model, is the part in charge to the physical data exchange and the interaction with the IDS services like the broker, the clearinghouse, and so on. This part is a foreground of the Market 4.2 project. Then we have a data app. We provide a basic data app that everyone can use for starting in order to avoid to start from scratch, but just customizing it in order to satisfying your needs. And it means that you need just to add the business logic you need for integrating your domains and your external systems. The FIWARE True Connector in particular will be provided with a dedicated data app, a FIWARE data app that we are working together with FIWARE in the design and the implementation. And I have a dedicated slide for it. So some highlights, basically, as I said before, the True Connector, the FIWARE True Connector is an open source solution, so released under AGPL version 3 license, is multi-data format and multi-protocol. It means that you can choose the proper configuration for you, and this is crucial for the interoperability and the integration with the other components. In particular, the True Connector works and can work and exchange data represented using the multi-part mix, the multi-part form, and HTTP header. And you can exchange data through HTTP, HTTPS, WebSocket over HTTPS, and IDCP version 2. So it is configurable, so you can choose the proper combination for you, and this is crucial if you need to interact and talk with an existing data space. It's extendable since you can customize and extend the data app based on your needs. The FIWARE data app is just an example, but you are free to define and implement what you need in order to integrate your external systems, your data lake, what you want. And this is integrable, and this is a direct consequence to the fact that it's configurable. So you can configure the True Connector in order for satisfying your requirements, but also the True Connector was integrated with several IDS services like several identity providers, brokers, and so on. This is the architectural overview of the connector. As I said before, two main components, the execution core container and the data app. We have also a usage control app that is a facade application for integrating the usage control framework. At this moment, we have integrated the My Data framework from Fraunhofer, and we have the clearinghouse that is that we use for registering transaction. As I said before, and maybe we have the only one public endpoint, the B endpoint, that you can configure for using several protocols, HTTP, HTTPS, WebSocket, that is crucial if you need to exchange large files, and this is a requirement that we received from the industrial domain, and IDSA version 2. All communication need to fit and need to be represented using the IDS information model. I mean, of the metadata for describing the communication. The high-level communication is represented here and is between the two data hubs. Here we have two instances of the connector. On the left we have a consumer, and on the right we have a provider. But let's now focusing on the data flow. So basically, independently of the IDS role, so consumer or provider, two connectors are able to exchange data. So we have a sender and a receiver. So the data hub is in charge to create and to start the communication and to create the message. This message will be processed by the execution core container that will perform a semantic validation, so checking if the message is compliant with the IDS info model, and well-formed, of course, interact with the identity provider in order to implement the access control and send physically the message to the destination. Finally, register the transaction to the clearinghouse. On the other side, on the receiver side, the message is validated, again, from the semantic perspective. Then the token is validated interacting with the identity provider, and the message is sent to the receiver data hub that is in charge to parse it and to prepare the response accordingly. The response will be sent back to the sender through the receiver that in the meantime registers the transaction to the clearinghouse. On the sender route, the last step is to enforce the response interacting with the usage control framework, and if it will receive a green light, the message will be forwarded to the sender data hub that, of course, is in charge to interact with the external domain and integrate your systems. So just a recap in terms of describing this compatibility matrix. We have three different ways to support data. I already mentioned before: multi-part mix, multi-part form, HTTP header, several protocols, HTTP for the public endpoint, HTTP, HTTPS, and WebSocket, and also IDSA version 2. By the way, we can also customize, you can customize through a simple configuration, even the internal communication, so the communication between the hub and execution core container that can be implemented through HTTP, HTTPS, and WebSocket. This is for to be more efficient, especially in case you need to use WebSocket for exchanging large data. We support several brokers, in particular the one from Fraunhofer AIS, the Intrasoft broker that is another result of the project Market 4.0, and the mobility broker. We support also three different identity providers that we also tested during the official integration camp events, the Fraunhofer ISAC version 1, version 2, and Orbiter. And we support the engineering clearinghouse for registering transaction, and we are working in order to enlarge this compliance to different clearinghouses available as a service. So let's zoom the FIWARE scenario, the typical FIWARE scenario, and the reason we are working on the dedicated data hub for FIWARE. This data hub is the NGSI LD data hub, and the rationale behind this, the design of this of a dedicated data hub is to make a communication between two existing FIWARE ecosystem possible, implementing the data sovereignty principles. So basically, the FIWARE data hub implements the NGSI LD API, that is the standard mentioned by Ulrich before, for describing and managing the context information. And in this way, the FIWARE True Connector will act as a man in the middle between two existing actors, two existing instances of the context broker, two existing FIWARE ecosystems that in a plug-and-play way, just after a simple configuration, will be able to interact and be part of the data space. Just a few words about the roadmap. So we are working we are refining, we have already implemented, and we are refining the support to the full contract negotiation phase. This is crucial since you need to exchange a contract and make a contract agreement between counterparts before exchanging the data. And we are also reaching another important result in terms of usage control, in particular thanks to a very fruitful collaboration in the context of the Platoon project and in synergy with Technalia. We are working in the integration of a new usage control framework, totally open source, that also will integrate the K framework from engineering for processing personal data and GDPR. As I said before, we are already part of the FIWARE catalog as incubated, and in the short term, in our short-term roadmap, we want to reach the full status membership, to reach the status of major generic enabler. And in the medium term, we have the integration of currently unsupported IDS component like the Paris and the App Store, and go on with the certification process. Here I put some references for where you can find the source code, in particular all information and all the source code is available under the engineering, research and development public repository on GitHub, but also is replicated under the IDSA official repository for that is the umbrella for the open source initiative. That is it. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Gabriele, and also Ulrich for these insights. So business is going well, as we can hear, with all the initiatives that the True Connector already is working in. And I saw in the chat that we are not only connecting the different data silos, but also different countries and continents. So glad to also have, again, visitors from Japan here in the call. And thank you also, Ulrich, for interacting directly here. And I'm really looking forward to the great things that will happen with True Connector and with Eclipse Dataspace Connector. Thank you.
Thanks.
It's really, I can say it's really hard to feel alone with such a great community and also with so many people here in the call, but I'm today literally not alone. So I'm glad to invite Anil to join me here on our stage in Dortmund. Because Anil now will give some more insights in the general setup of the open source structure here that we have at IDSA. And I will give you also the right slide deck. And Anil now will show you some more insights into open source landscape, how everything will evolve, and where we stand in this regards. Thank you, Anil.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you for the great introduction. And hello, good morning, everyone. And I would like to start with my presentation that explains the IDS strategy towards open source, as well as what we have new there, what are the highlights. But of course, as I know, everybody in the audience might be overwhelmed with lots of technical content here. So I would like to teleport you for a couple of minutes to a parallel universe, where we may call International Dataspaces Association as International Bread Baking Association. So if we were an association providing guidelines and documentation for a better bread, then our processes would look like this one. So for example, the guidelines, documentation, and design principles would be the ones who are describing the type of the oven and baking duration and ingredients. And the R&D and innovation would seek for answers to how to bake the bread better, cheaper, or how to scale the capacity of the oven. And the use cases would be about bread testing and evaluating the feedback. And development and implementation would be about preparing the bread doughs or baking breads. And then open source would be about the recipes. So that's the approach of IDSA at the moment. Like, we want to disseminate the recipes, and we want people to contribute to these recipes that are about implementing components. So this is a matter of dissemination on one hand, and also collaboration on the other one. At the moment, we have like a really active community in the open source, so you can you are warmly invited to check our main repository on GitHub, and we have at the moment 38 repositories, where 29 of them are publicly visible, and we have 128 people and that are making 36 teams who are working in really exciting projects over there. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, it's about the dissemination of the IDS standard to many people, to many institutions, and to many domains. And it's also a great place where people can learn from one another and from the other people's experience. And it aims to design the IDS standard in a usable and reusable way. So as long as the transparency is provided for the audience, it's a great place to express opinions and comments or provide feedback, and this is really very important for the maintainers and the developers of the projects as well. You are warmly welcome to check it. And since May, we are working on the with our task force about providing a strategy and also a structure for the open source landscape. And this involves a lot of rules and processes, and we have to define a lot of things really, and most of these are public now, and we have some more steps to go. And while doing that, we identified 3 target user personas, I can say. So I will start from the right hand. So the maintainers are, so it's a good place for maintainers because this is where they can find more contributors to their projects, as well as get some actual feedback from people. And it's also good for contributors for raising issues and showing themselves and joining a project simply. It's a great thing for a lot of people. And for the end users, though, it's also quite an important place, and so where you can really start experiment with these Dataspace components, and where you can take your first steps into the minimum viable Dataspace, which is the concept that we will discuss in the next slides. And it's really important for IDSA, not only for the dissemination perspective, but also from a feedback perspective, I can say. So this is a great source to gather the feedback from, like as we see the components in action, and we can also see people's reactions towards it. And it's this feedback is also providing an excellent input for defining the certification and the testbed processes, and also provide a great input for the reference architecture model. How do we position IDSA here? So we are more like in the position of the body that creates and updates and maintains the standards and provides the guidelines for the audience. And we are managing several general repositories. Other than that, we are not much involved in the project repositories that are maintained by their maintainers and developers. And we are also involved in the community management on a high scale, I can say. And some of these repositories are, so we have IDSG that is public, and IDSG for members. So these are the ones where specifications are provided for several components, as well as some frameworks. And also we have IDSTT, that stands for think tank. And this is the collaboration space for members, where they can collect ideas and share ideas and work together on new concepts. So at the current state, we have like several implementations for all components, and also some frameworks and other resources. And we are really looking to keep our doors open, and we are warmly inviting all the teams and institutions and developers to join us, basically. And I will explain how to join. Then we have the minimum viable Dataspace concept. So here it's like we want people to land on our OS landscape and start experimenting with a minimum viable Dataspace, like from the available catalog, available portfolio of projects over there. One should be able to combine the components that are required for a minimum viable Dataspace, and then start experimenting with it, and then use the frameworks or the other available projects to facilitate the entire process. One of the things here is that the testbed, so it's we are going to offer an IDSA testbed for to facilitate the entire process and also to foster new experimentations, I can say, and we want to allow people to be able to test their components and stuff. So it's expected to be available until the end of this year, I can say. And then how do we open our doors to people? That's about the graduation scheme. So it's the set of rules and processes. And so this is publicly available, by the way. This is the good news that I can share today. And so we just want to provide the transparent way to for the projects who are looking to join the IDSA OS landscape. And it's developed and it's based on the Cloud Native Computing Foundation's lifecycle process, and there are some customization made on there that make it more usable for the IDSA community. So here, the logic is like this. So we want to lower the barrier as low as possible in the beginning. So you are invited to join us. Like all you need to do is just to adopt the basic documentation, like you have to have your README file and your contributing rules and some other stuff that are described in the graduation scheme. And also then we are just raising the barrier a little bit. So for the second level, which is incubation, I mean, all the projects will experiment due diligence process. And then we have the third one, graduation process. And there we have several more expectations that are defined in the graduation scheme again. And you are welcome to check this, and all the applications for these levels are made from our website, and forms are available. You can just refer to our main page and then go under Make, and there's open source page, and there you will find more information. So I don't want to go too much into detail of this process, but it's like more or less in this process, I can say. So if you are a sandbox project and if you want to become an incubation one, you just send a form, and then it's depending on the working group recommendation and the due diligence that you will experience, you can become an incubation project. And from the incubation to graduation level, again, you send the proposal template, and it's based on the technical steering committee's decision and the voting, and then you can become a graduate project. The due diligence process is expected to last for 2 or 3 months in total, and where we have the diligence review for between 2 and 6 weeks, and then the technical steering committee vote. But we are expecting that one to be, I mean, the entire process to be shorter than this. And how do we position the two bodies, the technical steering committee and the head office? So one of the problems, I mean, potential problems or impediments that we may have is this idle projects case, I can say. So we want to ensure that all the projects are up and running, and people are interested in it, and people are contributing to them, and they are alive and attractive. And so that's why we are setting up some frequent reviews for all the projects. And also once per quarter, all the project submissions will be reviewed. I mean, so the head office position is more on the checking the submissions and notifying the project maintainers on project reviews, and mostly on the management of the administrative processes. And why should you be part of it? So we briefly explained it in the beginning, but it's a great place really to find more opinions, more feedback, and gather new contributors or learn from another institution's experience. So and how you can be part of it. So if you are an organization or a project owner, You just need to adopt the basic documentation, which is consisting of the README file and contribution rules and code of conduct and set of labels for issues. And then you apply it from the website form, and it makes you the part of the great community that we have there, and you can share our experiences and collect the feedback from the community. And also, if you are an individual, or if you know any individual who might be interested in that, so it might be a good opportunity to share your thoughts and ideas with maintainers and develop your own stuff, or join one of the development teams. By the way, this is not only for techies, and we also want to involve non-techies here and have a diverse community. So and make it like a discussion ground or like a forum to discuss the new ideas and new implementations. So really looking forward to it, and please know that the doors are open. And in the next steps, we can say that we are not getting involved in the projects, so they are maintained mostly by their maintainers and developers and project owners. But in the near future, we are looking to look for ways to act more or less like a project management institute, and getting maybe, helping the teams more about the project management processes. And also with we are not really getting into the licensing issues here, but this might be a way forward, like in the far future maybe. But we would also like to help the project teams with the licensing issues, as long as we have the capacity for it. So this is basically it from my end, and please let us know if you have any questions or comments or remarks. And as I said, the doors are open for all the projects and the teams and people.
Perfect, Anil. Thank you very much for physically being here with us, and have a good trip back to Turkey.
Thank you.
This afternoon, yeah. Thank you so much. Let's see. Get back the equipment here, the setup. Wow, so many insights in technical aspects, community aspects, governance. Yeah, where do we go now? This is the next point in our agenda is about, so where's my tool? There is my tool. The next point in the agenda is about mobility data space. So all the theory that we heard about, all the base work that has been done in the past years, now really can be visited and experienced with rewriting projects. So I think, or at least I hope, most of you know the Dataspace radar that we host on our website. I will put a link into the chat in a second. There we are collecting a lot of Dataspace endeavors and use cases already. And the first one that actually is a very, very good example from the mobility sector here, the Dataspace, mobility Dataspace, saw the light of the day like 2 weeks ago at the ITS World Congress in Hamburg. And I'm really thrilled that we will now see some more insights and learn, hopefully also, about the journey that you went through, all the lessons learned that you did, the path that you choose to give birth to this data space. And with this, I would say stage is yours to let us know more about the background of mobility data space and the great community that also stands behind this specific endeavor. Birgit, Heinke, Andreas, Heindl, sorry, the introduction, of course, has to be done. Birgit, Heinke, and Andreas Heindl are here with us from acatech, the organization company behind mobility data space. Glad to have you with us here on the virtual stage again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph, for your kind introduction and the opportunity to present the mobility data space today in the event. Our aim today is to talk about the path we had to go so far with the mobility data space and to reflect on the factors that made it possible that we were able to present 16 use cases live at the ITS World Congress earlier this month within roughly 1.5 years. So it's a great success story, and I would like to reflect together with my colleague Birgit about the factors that made it possible. And when we have a look at our presentation and the steps we would like to present you, there are 4 key factors we have in mind when we are talking about the path we took and the factors which were crucial to succeed with the mobility data space. First, it's about the initial situation, which means that there are needs for a data space in a specific domain. Second, it's about bringing all the players of a certain domain together, talk with them, and to get the commitment of all the players. Third, it's about using existing approaches and of implementation. It's about use cases, which were, at least for us, the main driver when we implemented the whole mobility data space. So when we have a closer look at the initial situation, it's about challenges and demands from various perspectives. It's about climate change and to organize sustainable mobility, which can be boosted by a data space. It's also a question of technological sovereignty. This is something what we learned, that there is a high need to create a framework for sovereign data sharing, as well as a framework for data security and to organized distributor. And in the end, it's all about competitiveness and the ability to innovate at the national and also on the European level. And in the end, the mobility data space should be one response to all the challenges I presented. First, the mobility data space aims on a transparent and sovereign infrastructure, which makes it possible that all the players have the same terms and conditions for data sharing, and on the other way around, it can set specific terms for sharing their own data and stay owner of their data. Second, it's the aim of the mobility data space to become a one-stop shop for mobility data, with data from current weather information to infrastructure data, air quality data, or car data, which is available via the mobility data space. Third, the mobility data space should be an infrastructure which is easy to access and which is transparent, and where the users can promote their own services, where new innovations are possible, and where you can, with a connector technique, collect or share the data on a very easy basis. Fourth, it's also about security, and the mobility data space is in line with the principle of security by design, also in a very decentralized framework with the data residing with the users. Only in the middle, the catalog is stored centrally. And in the end, you're all invited to test the mobility data space because it's free of charge till 2024. And this means that you're able to test the mobility data space and the added value remains with the users for the next years. So this might be a big advantage just to get in touch with the technique, with the mobility data space, with a mobility community. A second factor is the stakeholder dialogue. What we learned is that it's very important to get together all the major players in the respective domain, here the mobility domain, with the OEMs, with suppliers, startups, other platforms like the National Access Point, the Caruso Dataplace, the HERE platform, and many others, in order to get the commitment of all the stakeholders and to involve from the first step all the major players. What we also learned that it's very important that or a neutral facilitator, moderator, and driver like acatech, our organization behind the mobility data space, is crucial to get the commitment between competitors. So this was one of the main factors that we could succeed, and acatech took responsibility for the mobility data space for the major players. And secondly, high-level political support was also a real facilitator for us, because the mobility data space was supported by the German government, Chancellor Merkel, and also by the Ministry for Transport and Infrastructure. Around the ecosystem, with some of the selected participants, you can see the mobility data space infrastructure, which Birgit will present afterwards. One additional remark. We started on a national level, but the mobility data space is not limited to a national level. The use cases which are already live provide data from all over Europe. And we are aiming to get more and more use cases from companies all over Europe, and to get more and more data by implementing more use cases on an international level, and to get also involved in all the initiatives around Gaia X, Catena X, and also the NAPCOR approach, where we are closely linked, because the mobility data space should not stand alone, but should be one piece in a broader community within a data space community around the mobility sector. So this as a first very, very brief insight on the initial situation and the stakeholder dialogue. And I would like to hand over to you, Birgit.
Thank you, Andreas. In the following minutes, I would like to give you some more insights of the development of the mobility data space. On this picture, you can see the key components components of the mobility data space in the middle with the connectors of participants at the edge. It presents some exemplary participants, but the ecosystem is open to everyone who wants to join the community and contribute or share data. The identity and application management guarantees trust and is a prerequisite for each data transaction. The broker is our central data catalog where participants and interested parties can view the metadata of the data offered by the participants within the data space. And the transaction history is being used to log data transfer between participants and can be accessed by the parties involved in the transaction only. On the next slide, I would like to share some more insights about the development process with you. As Andreas already mentioned, the project started with a stakeholder dialogue. Since the beginning, the IDS architecture is a technical base which enables data sovereignty, traceability, and trust between the participants of the ecosystem. Our aim was to develop the data space together with the stakeholders and especially potential participants of the data space. Therefore, we started explaining and discussing the concept along with the architecture and the implications of the federated approach. Further activities can be divided into two parallel streams. One was developing the mobility data space. Based on the assumptions that we need all components of the IDS reference architecture, we started adapting it to our specific needs. I will give some more information on this process afterwards. At the same time, we had to carve out differences to other platforms and initiatives, as well as distinctive features of the federated mobility data ecosystem. There might be different approaches, but at the end, all can be connected to one mobility data ecosystem. The development and adoption process is still going on.
Sorry, Birgit.
Yes.
There are some audio issues, so it's a bit robotic. Maybe Andreas, if you shut down also your camera to give some more bandwidth to Birgit, hopefully this will fix the issue. And let's see how it goes then.
Short remark from the backstage. Birgit, it could help if you briefly refresh the browser and then enter the stage again. That could also help.
So we lose Birgit now for a second.
Because of the refreshing.
She will be back anytime soon. Andreas, Heindl, did you already close your camera? Maybe all of us who are not with Birgit in the part of explanation, we can shut down the camera. Perfect. Birgit is back. Let's see. Thanks.
Hope it works better now. Sorry.
Yeah, much better.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please. Sorry for interrupting.
Thanks, Andreas. Yes, where adoption and next steps. The development and adoption process is still going on. To receive more information about the user requirements, we conducted workshops for the components, broker, clearinghouse, and connector. The requirements already discussed in other communities, such as GitHub, have been considered as well. Currently, we have a pilot system for data transactions, which will be stabilized, enhanced, and improved within the next years. Some topics have already been identified for further development, such as the user interface of the broker, which is especially important also to attract new participants. Further topics are additional governance processes, which needs to be defined, such as the use of vocabularies or regulations for the clearinghouse. To summarize, we have complex new requirements and a diverse group of participants within the project. In addition to that, we plan to enhance our service map as well as to further develop the processes and the system. In a nutshell, it can be said that the mobility data space is on its way, and you will see the roadmap on the next slide. Last but not least, our implementation roadmap, which shows the different phases of the project. We started in the second quarter of 2020, and our first big milestone when we talk about the implementation of the data space was the development of a system prototype by end of March this year. This was the proof of the concept, which was validated with a demonstration use case. In this early stage, not all components were available. The next milestone was met end of April with the definition of the requirements for the second release of the data space, which went live end of September this year. This version already includes all components mentioned before. Currently, we have an interim operation at Fraunhofer, but the search for a technical operator has already been started. Until the technical provider takes over, further development and stabilization of the system is planned. Therefore, we defined requirements for the third release, which will be implemented until the first quarter of 2022. And that's the end of the technology part, and back to Andreas.
I think, Andreas, you have to hit again, join the stage on, yeah, exactly, perfect. Now we can see you again.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I would like to talk about the use cases and the tight timeline, which were key drivers for the implementation. What we learned is that we do not only have to talk with the key players, but to get the commitment for the mobility data space via real use cases with a business case behind it. And in the end, we could present 16 use cases at the ITS World Congress from very, very different areas of the mobility sector, from convenient and smart mobility to safe and reliable mobility to sustainability topics and topics around the data ecosystem. And much more use cases are in the pipeline, around 60 plus use cases in total. And the use cases were a key driver because we could validate the infrastructure and we could define the requirements for the use cases and for the mobility data space on a very, very practical basis. This was one of the key elements that we could succeed within, well, at the end for the use cases, 8 months for the implementation. I don't want to present you all the use cases because fortunately we have some use cases in presentations afterwards. So I will try to sum up the main factors and to give you a brief outlook about the mobility data space. In the end, it's about defining and identifying the need for a data space and the political will, which were a driver that the project was started in March 2020. And when acatech brought together the relevant players of the mobility data domain as a neutral facilitator, and we were talking with them and decided to use existing approaches like the IDS infrastructure and to develop the infrastructure for the mobility data space. And in the end, I mentioned it several times, the use cases were the main drivers that we were able to keep the pace very, very high for the implementation of the mobility data space. And 2021 was the year of formation of the mobility data space. In the next 5 years, we would like to grow and to scale on a European level, which means that we would attract more subscribers to expand the data spectrum and especially the use case portfolio, to develop the technology further, and to get in touch with all the European players to create a data sharing community and a data space ecosystem on the European level. So this is the insight on the mobility data space. We are looking forward for your questions and, well, join the data sharing community.
I could not say more to that. Thank you so much, Andreas, for these insights. I think it's really a great inspiration for all other endeavors out there, and a great way to learn also how others did it, and yeah, get inspired by this. Thank you so much for being today with us. And yeah, for the questions, we will go there later in the Q&A and discussion round after the use case presentations that we now have. Because you said it, so 16 use cases went live with the ITS World Congress, with the birth of the mobility data space, and this is only the tip of the iceberg. More than 60 use cases are in the pipeline to follow, and I'm very, very sure that over the next months there are much more use cases that will follow here. And we now will have a look at the tip of the iceberg. So let's see, I saw that Gernot eventually had some technical issues. Gernot, are you with us and able to join me here on stage? Yes, he is. Perfect. I can see you already. Let's see if I can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, I had some intense minutes before the show, because when I clicked share video, when I wanted to enter the stage, my system died. And so I had a replacement system, and I running on the replacement system. And there I had some, because it's my second old computer, and I have some certification problems, so I had to update my presentation, but I think and I hope I can do it and make it. So I share my screen.
Since I know that you're able to tackle much worse technical challenges,
are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we are.
Good. So in the end, the live demo is not working because in my browser I have old certificates, and so it's not displaying all content. But unboxing data space, this is our topic today. Smart parking in Wolfsburg and smart Maß in Kiel. So these are two demo use cases of the Datenraummobilität, so the data space mobility, and we have presented it in Hamburg. I just used to live in Hamburg, so I forgot the city. And this was a short time, and I want to give you a short introduction. But first, some pickups from what Ulrich said and what Gabriele said. So FIWARE is about context information. It's constantly flowing this information that is describing the world around us. So it's not static data, like here is a file of data from past year, but it's constantly changing, and it's repeatingly it's time series data. So context information is where is the bus, when will it arrive, what is the filling level of a garbage can, and so this is describing data, and we in FIWARE exchange this data in REST fashion. So we use classical internet technology to do and exchange, so work on context information and to exchange them. And as Ulrich said, it's about breaking up data silos, because we have many data fields, so it's domains like agriculture, industry, ports, they have their data and they have their standards. This is probably quite okay working these days. We are in 2021, but if you want to bring those different domains together, it becomes difficult again. And this is where we as FIWARE see our mission to break up the silos, to make data interchangeable, to make them interoperable. And if you look into the city, as Ulrich said, showing the digital representations, the digital twins of entities. So where are the buses? It's about trash cans. It's about industry. It's about traffic jams. It's about traffic lights. It's so many different data sets out there. And NGS ILD is here to help, because we want to bridge this gaps between the different domains, and NGS ILD is one common data exchange standard and interface that is comprised of not only an API but also data structures and data models. And so we want to bring all these different data coming from different data sources together to bridge the gap and to make them interoperable, and to let users work on this data in a simple way. And this is our goal, and this is what we want to achieve. So we have a whole set of components in our catalog. So there is 5 chapters. This is limited here on this sketch for only 3. So basically we have context information coming from the real world. We will integrate this different data, like street data, truck data, waste bin, citizen claim data. We integrate this in our central component, the FIWARE context broker. And we have, of course, means and tools and components that do the connection or the processing of data themselves. So it's continuously influx of data, and the context broker is doing as a data hub. It's providing data to users, to systems, to provide them to processing engines, and to get back the results of processing, and makes this available to users and systems again. So the FIWARE context broker is the central data hub. Probably have heard about it. This is our core message, and we repeat it sometimes. So this is what we offer, and bringing this together, you can work with this ecosystem in different sizes. So you can start small, like in a company, you just want to integrate data from third-party systems, and you offer them to smart solutions, like your analysis systems for artificial intelligence or similar. Then you can bring in a second step, in a maybe second iteration of a project, you can integrate many different systems and make the data interoperable and let them work together. And then you come to the third phase that you say, okay, let's share data across different data spaces, different domains. And this is where we talk about data spaces. And of course, in DRM, Datenraum Mobilität, we are talking about data spaces. And this is how we do it. So we have different applications with the context broker at the core. And if you have different domains like smart city, smart building, and smart port, this is just as a representation here. They are having their data in the context broker. They all have a context broker. And so this is the tool for exchanging data. And so we are connecting context brokers for exchanging data between different participants in a data space. So the context broker, again, is our central component for doing this. And as Gabriele said, we do this in conjunction with integrating the FIWARE True Connector provided by engineering. They are providing the execution core container, and we have implemented the data app that is doing the communication between the context brokers on both sides, on the consumer side and on the context provider side, and there will be apps requesting data. So it's possible that you say, give me all buses in Barcelona. This is a request from a consumer. Or you have communication between systems, like one context broker is notifying another context broker about changes. So there are multiple ways of querying data and exchanging data, and it's also bidirectional. So a context broker on one side is not always consumer and not always provider, but it can be both. So we have to consider the bidirectional traffic between those two participants in the system. And we have presented this in the ITS World Congress, as Ulrich said. So we have on the left side the smart parking solution from Wolfsburg, and on the right the Kiel smart mobility solution, the digital twin of the mobility station. And I only have 10 minutes. I cannot go too much into detail. In Wolfsburg, in this smart parking use case. We collect information about parking spots, and we have detectors and sensors there, and about charging station. And this data is integrated into the context broker as shown before, and this data is made available to the public via the Dataspace Mobility, the Datenraum Mobilität, and the consumer in this case is not a context broker but an app, and this app was realized as a mobile app and also as a web page. So if you enter this app and you see this data, this is requested by a consumer, the data gets transferred through the Dataspace, and on the other side the context broker is delivering the data back to the app. And so we have the data available in FIWARE that you can run in a system itself is made available as information in the Dataspace Mobility, or of course in others. In Kiel, we have the digital twin of the mobility station, and there is multiple data in there. There's routing data, there is charging stations, there is bike stations and bikes positions, there is weather environment data. So many different sources, and you can all use them together in this same one single language, NGS-ILD, with requesting the context broker. So you do not have to learn different APIs. You do not have to learn different dialogues. You just request them all the same. And we have this presented to Mr. Andreas Scheuer, our fading Minister of Traffic. And you can see here, and my demo unfortunately is dead, we have presented on the left the routing. And so the request for the routing data is flowing through the context broker. And on the right side, it's live updating data coming from the context broker about the availability of bikes, parking spots, and also weather data, for example. And this is a bigger picture of it. So here you can see how many parking spaces are available, and there are also special parking places for disabled persons, bike sharing. So all these different data coming together, and they are requested and queried in the same fashion, only via NGS-ILD, and you do not have to care where the data come from or in what data format the data was available originally, because you only talk to context broker and through the IDS Dataspace and the Dataspace Mobilität. And this is what I just hacked together because my demo died. Here you can see data flowing through the context broker, not to the context broker, through the data app within the True Connector, in FIWARE True Connector. And here you can just see, I wanted to show you live, but I told you already. Here are the multi-part header and payload JSON strings created, and this is necessary for the transport through the dataspace, because in multi-part messages we use this, we follow the information model, and we translate our messages into these IDSA standards to let it transport from one connector to the other. And I have just put this here to see what it's in there. So we have created a request message because it's constantly requesting data. Like, for example, the availability of parking spots is, I think, refreshing polling data every 5 seconds. So it's constantly checking new data available in the context broker. And so here we are requesting the request as a consumer connector, and we issue a request message, and we pack all the necessary data that is asked, that is querying the context broker. We pack them into a JSON format to let it be transported as a payload through the dataspace. And we have to address, as a receiving connector, we have to send this data to a publicly available endpoint. And here we see the NGS-ILD query that we want to see in this request only all entities that are available as for the mobility station data type. And so we pack these REST call that is constantly querying data from the context broker. We pack it into a multi-part message, we pack it into the payload, and this data gets presented on the provider side to the context broker, and the responses to the request is sent back, again, a similar way, packing the data into an IDSA message and sending it back to the requester. And so basically this was it. I wanted to show you that live. because I could not because my system died. But I can maybe try later, or if you want to see this, please give me a call. We can do it in a separate session. It is live, it's working, it's available, and so we make the context broker not with steady and resting data, but constantly updating data in the context broker available into Dataspaces and into the Datenraum Mobilität, showing with those two use cases. And that was it. A little bit improvised, sorry for that, but I wanted to at least give the presentation. Thank you.
Perfect, Gernot. Thank you so much. And as you said, if you want to experience the real thing, reach out to Gernot or also to us. We can make the contact directly so you can get your hands on the actual thing going live. And thank you for the improvisation here. Gernot.
Thank you.
Already on stage here with me, thank you, Jenny Wittwer from Free Now, to be with us today, because actually we will have a look at last use case now from the mobility data space. And I can say, I saw parts of the presentation already back in Hamburg.
Ist die Big Karte.
Andreas? Sorry? What was I about to say? So I can really connect to this use case because back in the time where we did business travels, I was a frequent user also here of your application. And I was, when you presented this in Hamburg, I was like, oh, cool, when can I make use of it? And I'm really thrilled to now see a bit more about your use case and also bring it to the others here. So stage is yours, Jenny. Gernot and Andreas, let's step off stage to give it to Jenny, and we'll be back in the discussion later.
Thanks a lot, Christoph, for the introduction, and also a warm welcome from my side. My name is Jenny, and I'm responsible for the public affairs activities in Germany and Italy for Free Now. And I'm also proud to present you the very first use case that went live in the mobility data space. It is a cooperation between us and the German Weather Service, or as we say, how we can assure that our users get safe, dry, and happy from A to B with Free Now. And let me introduce you my company on the next slide. Some of you still might know us under our former name, MyTaxi. That is how it all started. We come from the ride-hailing business and evolved our offer to become a multimodal app, meaning that we offer, besides ride-hailing, also other modes of transports, which are e-scooters, e-bikes, e-mopeds, and car-sharing vehicles for the time being. But of course, we also seek to get one day the full range of mobility possibilities in a city. And I think, of course, also of the public transport services, which is the backbone of each city. And what makes us unique is that we offer everything in one user interface. So it means the user just needs to register him or herself and can plan, book, and pay a service within our application. So it's a deep integration that we do. And next slide, please. Why the heck do we need weather data? Some might of you think about. It's because we have observed so far that some modes of transports are more suitable when the weather is nice. And these are, of course, the micro-mobility services. As you can imagine, no one likes to ride an e-scooter on a slippery road or to get wet. And that's why we thought it would be convenient to have these kind of data. And as we do not have them by our own, it was quite natural to us to set up this kind of use case with the mobility data space and ask the German Weather Service to get these data. And we receive them via a connector of the mobility data space and use these data to notify our users whether the weather is good or bad and suitable for use in micro-mobility service. And we also use these data, of course, to analyze the user behavior, as it can be also convenient to use it for the, in alignment with the weather forecast to do certain campaign management. And on the next slide, I'll show you how it looks in practice. When the weather is bad and a user has already opted in for an e-scooter, we send this person a kind of warning notification and ask, are you really sure about it? Doesn't look so nice. Is it not more convenient to use a car sharing vehicle or ride hailing service? And on the next slide, there's the good weather case. There, a user is opening the Free Now app in general, and we check if nearby there's an e-scooter or e-moped offer nearby this user. And if the weather looks good, we send out a notification to the user by saying, why not profiting from this great weather? Use a micromobility service. And we do not send out this notification to every user. Next slide, please. We make a user segmentation, because if you have never ever used an e-scooter before, you won't be convinced just because the weather is nice. Or maybe some of our users still use us mainly when they go from and to the airport and have maybe luggage with themselves. So it's also not really helpful for them to know, yeah, I can now use an e-scooter, but it's not really helpful in my situation. And so we only notify those users that have already taken a trip with an e-scooter on our application. And we also check, as I already said, if there is an e-scooter nearby, because I can also get highly frustrated otherwise that I get this kind of great recommendation but cannot make use of it as there is no e-scooter at all nearby. And then in alignment with the weather, we send out either a bad or good weather notification. And on the next slide, I can show you some first results. We kicked this off in June this year and focused on our 3 key markets, Berlin, Munich, and Hamburg, where we also have the highest supply on e-scooters. And more than 20,000 passengers have already taken part in this experiment. And what I found by myself quite surprising is that the good weather scenario was the most successful one. Maybe I always underestimated the Hamburg or Berlin summer, but 73% of the users who received such an in-app notification that the weather is fine did also an e-scooter tour within 2 hours, and particularly in Hamburg and Berlin, where we have the highest availability of e-scooters. By contrast, the bad weather scenario did not take place so much, or was not convincing so many users. They were quite stubborn and still said, yes, nice that you notify me, but I want to use an e-scooter and I will do it. And well, we still dig into this, why this is the case. We think maybe on the one hand, the weather was still okay, and we maybe were too cautious by saying now the weather is not nice, while the Hamburg user said, no, this is for you, bad weather, but not for me. I use my e-scooter now anyway. Or it can be that at the location, that is also more likely, it was still okay for doing this short distance ride. So that's why they stick to it. And we also have to take into account that the sample was much smaller, so you already had to opt in for an e-scooter to get this kind of notification. And well, we now kick off the bad weather season, so maybe we have then more cases to explore. And what is also another expectation is that an e-scooter is way cheaper than using a taxi. So as we also get now another supplier for car sharing vehicles, that might be also the more natural replacement when you do not choose an e-scooter. So this is all we want to explore further and bring it to the next level. But all in all, we can really say that it makes a difference or an impact on user behavior to use weather data. And yeah, we are happy to roll this out also in other European cities and to bring it then to the next level. Thank you very much.